Today's guest is Lalit Gautam. Lalit has a degree in pharmaceutical medicine with an MBA in international marketing and entrepreneurship with over 12 years of startup experience. Lalit is the founder and CEO of Sensegrass. Sensegrass is a moonshot agri-tech company solving the biggest issue of soil fertility by predicting and eliminating the excess fertilizers from the soil to help small-scale farmers grow faster and healthier. He is a public speaker and has spoken on a variety of topics from the future of SDGs to civic education in the Arab world, and also business model importance in startups to human IQ versus the future of AI. Oh my goodness. I'm thinking we should have several shows with you because your experience and your passion goes so into so many different areas. So we're so glad you joined us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for having me here. Great intro.
Well, I'm like, having been, obviously vetted through being a TEDx speaker, Forbes under, 30 under 30 and MIT 35 under 35, you were just making a difference from the get-go. What gave you your sense to make impact so young?
Yeah, I think that's a good question to start this podcast today. I think coming from India, the surrounding around me when I was kid was a bit challenging, right? Coming from like in a very small town back in India gave me kind of a sense where you have to see problems from a different lens, right? Whether these are like, problems related to your villages, agriculture, or whether these are like your daily to daily problems, which you can see in your city, like whether these are transports, pollution, and all this stuff. So I think the seed of solving these kind of issues came when I was kid, right? I have seen my grandfather, my father, and even the people around me was struggling for the basic stuff, right? When I say the basic stuff, of course, like not the food or the housing, but like the challenges related to the pollutions and growing the right food in agriculture and all this stuff was there. So I think when you are an Indian, you have a lot of problems to solve, and I think that's one of the biggest advantage of being coming from a country like in India. You have a lot of problem and you know what problems you have to solve. So I think it started from my childhood when I've seen my grandfather struggling to get the higher yield and getting the best crops.
So many people think about innovation as intelligence or whatever, but what I love about you is that you were solving a real need that literally impacted, livelihoods of so many people.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a sentence, and I'm sure you can relate to that sentence. Innovation, the innovation is the mother of necessity, or I would say like necessity is the innovation is the mother of necessity, right? Mm-hmm. Whenever you require some kind of requirement, when a human have any requirement in their life, they always looking for these kind of innovation. Like very past when Adam and Eve was there, they were hungry and they had to find how to cook the food, and they know how to burn the and light the what do you call the stuff. So I think mm-hmm. what I'm trying to tell you is it's a bit complex to put into this word, but I think when you see these kind of challenges on your every step, you have to figure it out how to solve these stuff. And I think that was my part. Like when I was, as I told you, when I was kid, I have seen some of the problems around me. Even though I come from in a decent family where I didn't see a lot of changes what other people usually see in India. But when I was like that was the starting point of me. And then I decided to start the science. That was one of the biggest reason I chose science in my high school, and I studied biotech, the biology and physics and chemistry. And this is how it started. And during my undergrad, I solved one of the issues of contraceptions. I launched a contraception technology which helped families to use contraception without taking any pills and the medicine. And this is how it started, and eventually all the dots got connected, and now I'm solving this agricultural issues with the Sensegrass.
Wow, that's amazing. In our program, Moral Startup Studio is really dedicated for pre-seed funding to really support students to get their idea on paper to solve a problem. So any of you that are out there listening, if you is solving a problem that's really one that you've seen or touched personally, I think will allow you to create in a very powerful way. As Lalit has had one exit and has founded 3 startups, can you please go back to when you were beginning your very first startup? What are some things that you would like to tell people that are in the process of doing their very first pitch competition, they're getting together their first business model canvas for the first time? What's something that made a big difference for you that can help support them in being able to create some value?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I think coming back to my first few years of the startup, like first of all, I'm not coming from any business family, or no one in my family has ever done any kind of business. So I have done MBA, right? But when I enter into my first startup, HenchGuard, I realized what I've studied in MBA is nothing to do with these kind of startups. Like I'm completely doing something from the scratch. And when you start like pitching your stuff, when you decided to solve this problem. So by the way, my first startup was a machine learning marketplace that connects the rural artisans with the international designers, so to co-create the goods. So it was a platform to bring the livelihood to the artisans through a more smarter way. So when I started working on these basic things like the business canvas, pitches, the executive summary, I realized these are these kind of things that you have self-learned without the help of any mentoring, any classes of your MBA degree and all. These all comes automatically in your mind when you decided that you're going to solve this problem, right? Everything then come together. And this is so addictive that once you decided to solve any problem, you go deeper into those kind of the root cause of these problems. Like, okay, let's say these are the artisans, these are the livelihood. What kind of problem they are facing? What are the key challenges? And you simply go deeper into those kind of the communities. You go to the people, you talk to them, you discover like there's a lot of things that which you never knew in your life, yet you never studied in your life, but suddenly you know everything, and then you start putting those learning and wisdom on the piece of paper, and this is how it started. So it's a completely different journey. What I'm trying to tell you is that you suddenly realize that you know a lot and you know nothing, right? So it's a combination of a kind of a situation where you feel so good about the problem you are trying to solve, and that's the reason why a lot of time people say, hey, solve your passion, go with your passion. So I think this is somehow related to your passion.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It seems like there's I hope I'm hearing you correctly. The paradox that I'm hearing is that on one side, you have to be really strong and certain enough to say, I can make a difference. And then in the other side, you're really humble in actually learning and talking with people. The one soundbite that I hope everyone really gets is the idea that you have to have a singular question, and knowing that you know more than you think you do and less than you should is probably where we need to go. Does that sound right?
Exactly. As much as you can talk to people, you will see that you're learning every day. So I think, you are on the point, like, because this is a combination of these two things, right? And as I said, like, when you realize there's a problem, you just keep talking to these people, different people, and you realize like your problems or your questions are getting solved by these people.
You know what I also love about the point that you're making is that so much around tech and innovation right now is really focused on the technology, but the technology is only one piece of the question. It's people, real people stories, real people issues, real people challenges, and learning from people is the other part of the equation. And I don't see enough attention on the speaking to other people and learning from other people piece. Is there anything you can add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, the innovation and the social issues is very important. A lot of people ask me like, hey, why did you started something in the social impact? I said like every problem in this world is a social impact problem, is related to your social issues. And eventually every tech solution, every solution which is related to innovation and technology usually start with your impact, empathy in the human touch. Because at the end of the day, the technology and the innovation is just a tool, but you're solving the problem of the human, right? So even when we talk about the artificial intelligence and machine learning, what is this? I mean, like, this is created by the human. So eventually human come first and the technology comes second.
How,
So
yeah, when I look at your portfolio and I look, you're part of Ashoka, you're part of the Audi Environmental Fellows. You're also, very involved with SDGs. And how, in addition to your engagement in the startup world, the VC world, what advice do you have for people to be able to participate in some of the organizations where you've actually become a leader? That just doesn't happen overnight.
that's true. It's a long process. Like people often see you, hey, when they Google me, like they realize, hey, this is Forbes 30 or this is Joka and all. But they don't realize, like, the hard work behind the scene, what happening behind the scene. And I think these kind of organizations, the reason why I'm affiliated with all these organizations, actually these are very important in my career. Because eventually, let's assume I've started my companies, right, and I'm doing nothing else. You have a limited exposure. You are just limited to your company. But when you involve these kind of organization, you also learn a lot of other things which you never got in your own startup, like the leadership, connecting to the different people, different workshops, empathies. There's a tons of things, right? And I think the most important part is the right exposure, right connections, the right network. So for me, I think my advice to the people who wants to do anything related to this, I think in my life, in my career, these organizations, whether these are Ashoka, One Young World, UN, or Merit, all this stuff, played a very important role, because I got to learn a lot of things from these organizations. And of course, the learning I have implemented in my own startup, my own companies, to bring the different values and ethics, and maybe the culture for my employees, for my team.
Well, and you're lucky enough to live in your experience, because I'm still kind of catching up. I hear right exposure, right network, but you said one other right that I did not get to, WRITE.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are they? The
Exactly.
right exposure, something else, and then right network was the third. What was the second, please?
I think the right exposure, right network, and maybe I missed the one third one. Sorry.
That's okay.
Uh,
No, just go with the flow. That's cool.
yeah.
The other thing that I think is a really important contribution that you're making on our program is that for everyone out there, please have three distinct columns. You have to be connected and contributing to three distinct environments. One is certainly your local environment, which for many of you is your college, building relationships with founders in your college and entrepreneurship in your college. Then there's also the community at large. The second lane would be actually national. Where else in addition to upstate New York are you making connections in the United States? And the layer that Lalit has given us is the idea that because so many problems are integral, that in order to create sustainable and system level value, you need to have an international awareness and connection. And those sometimes take maybe 12 to 15 years to build. Is there anything else you want to say on that front?
No, I think you're absolutely correct, Jennifer. Eventually, your network is made of the different layers, right? As you rightly mentioned, eventually you have to start with your local network. When I say the local network, of course, your family, your friend, or maybe your neighborhood, because this is how you have exposed to the most of the problem, and then eventually you go to the next national level. And of course, like with the right time, I think you have to go to that international exposure as well, or maybe in that level, because the similar kind of problem eventually change when you move from one level to the second, and second to the third. And you also get a sense, like how the same problem changing when you change the level of your network, and how you going to change your approach as well to solve the same problem in a very different way, right? So maybe
Yeah.
a problem in the US is going like it's common problem in US and India. It's going to be solved in a two different way, right? So I think you should have to that kind of exposure in a different in a different stage and a different level. But of course, it will eventually come with the time, right? You do not need to force yourself to go very rapidly to achieve all these goals.
I'm so thankful because you actually gave us if you think of a combination lock, it usually has three numbers. You turn one to the right, one to the left, then circle around to the right again. Right exposure, right time, right network. There we have it. This is perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. So all of you, there's so many wonderful sound bites here. Your network is made up of different layers. Many of us, and I'm included in this, I get attached to my creation, and what I love about your message here is that we need to stay vigilant to the question, but not the solution, because what we just got information around is that the solution may shift based on the community that we're adding value to, and then also timing and also new evolutions of an additional innovation. So how do we learn to have the strength to have an idea and have that kind of boldness, but also the innocence to actually be more committed to the question than the solution? Can you help us out?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky question, Jennifer. And I think most important part, like, to achieve this is your time, right? It's your learning phase. Eventually, like, when you are in a starting phase, you may not expose to that kind of depth of this kind of innocent, which you have mentioned, and also the other thing as well. But I think with the time, and when you go more deeper into that, when you start doing your homework very sincerely, very innocently, you get to know these kind of things, these kind of steps. And in as you mentioned, like the right network, the right connections, and the right timing eventually bring you to this kind of stage where you have the perfect positioning to solve those kind of problems, right? Because as you said, and I think as I earlier said as well, your problem remain going to be same, but your solution and the way you're going to approach these problems is eventually change. And it all comes with the time, right? I mean, like, there's a no formula, there's a no right or wrong.
Yeah.
It eventually come with that that the learning curve of an individual.
Wow.
What I was in 2015 or 16, and what you see me right now in 2020 is a completely two different person.
Yeah. That's amazing. How, if people want to follow your journey, because like you're literally, to me, you're just getting started, and with as much value as you've created now, I'm like, I can't wait to continue to learn from you. How do you want people in our community to connect with you or Sensegrass? What's the best way for us to follow you?
I think the best way is definitely is the LinkedIn is the most, it's like a professional connection network, easiest way to follow. I usually post all this stuff on LinkedIn. But of course, like if someone have very specific questions, anything, my email ID is pretty simple. It's already on LinkedIn.
Okay.
It's lalit@sensegrass.com. But I think LinkedIn is the best way to follow it.
I think in closing of this particular segment, we're going to have you back again, because I feel like we just literally have a sliver of a sliver. But the most significant thing I want to hear for all of you to hear is that with Lalit, here we have a gentleman that was born and grew up in a small village of Uttar. And in this kind of modest beginning, he has become one of the most awarded agricultural entrepreneurs in the world, respected in 5 countries have been identified in this program, which is great. And so no matter where you have come from, I think if you think about what question you want to solve, let that be the most important thing. And entrepreneurs come from so many different places. I'm so inspired by Lalit's story. I hope that his humble beginnings will have you maybe think that you can make a bigger difference than you might have had you not heard this program. As we come to a close, I'll be sure to include links to our show. We do hope that you subscribe. I'm so glad you joined us today. I want to thank our sponsors, Marl Accelerator, in particular Amir Khan and Prakash Goswami. I also want to mention Upstate Venture Connect, Upstate Capital, and NextCore for the tipping points you have already been creating in the Rochester entrepreneurship community. I also want to thank our producer, Scott Fitzgerald. Here we are in Rochester, New York at Rockvox Studio. We look forward to next program. Thank you.